All right, welcome back. So, last time we spoke about if statements, and I just want to remind you all to please practice each lesson before moving on to the next lesson. So anyways, we practiced if statements, and now we want to go over if-else and if-else-if statements. So this is going to be an extension of the last lesson. So we have this can buy a beer function, and evaluates if you can buy a beer or not, and we just have an if statement that says if these conditions are true, as in you're old enough to drink a beer and you have enough money, then we print out can buy a beer. So we're going to do an if-else statement instead of if statement. So an if-else is if this is not true, then do whatever is inside the else. So if we're not old enough to buy a beer, or we are old enough to buy a beer and don't have enough money to buy a beer, or we have enough money to buy a beer but we're not old enough to buy a beer, then we go to this else. So we say else can't buy a beer. Now if I print this out, we should get something in the console that says can't buy a beer because we passed in 22, so we are old enough, but we don't have enough money because the beer cost is $4 and we only have $3. Okay. So that goes over if else. Now let's talk about something more complicated, a little more complicated, which is if else if. And if else if statements are used when you have multiple conditions to evaluate. For example, if you're grading a test and you got like a 75, you want to say that 75 is a C is because it's between a 70 and 79. So let's go ahead and write a function for that. So let's get rid of this, and let's get rid of this, and let's get rid of this, and let's create a new function called static void grade test, and let's pass in a score to evaluate, for example 75, and we should return C, right? Or print out C, not return C. So let's create a variable called grade, and let's print out this variable. To do grade is plus grade because we're going to print out something, and then we're going to also add whatever the value is to that print statement. So we're going to say grade is whatever the value of grade is. And we have an error here because it hasn't been initialized yet. So we have to initialize grade. So we say if grade is greater than or equal to 90, we say, sorry, not grade, if score is greater than or equal to 90, because we're using the input, which is an integer, to say that, okay, if the score is 90 or greater, then we're going to set grade equal to an A. And actually, we should make this a double because technically tests can have scores that are decimals, because you can have questions worth 2.5 points, 3.5. It doesn't have to be like an integer. So we're going to pass in a double. Now, we still have an error here because there is no terminating condition. So if it's not greater than or equal to 90, it doesn't know what it can be. Like the Java compiler doesn't know that like default value is like a weird character that equals 0 as its decimal value, but it doesn't know that. It doesn't know what this could be. Like if it's not 90, if it's not greater than 90, then it has to know what the value is. So we have to keep going. So we have to say if else if grade is greater than or equal to 80, then we say the grade equals B, and you probably know what's next. Else if score is greater than or equal to 80. So if the score is greater than or equal to 80, grade equals B, then we say else if score is greater than or equal to 70, then we say grade equals C, and then you probably guess it's 60 next, which it is. Score is greater than or equal to 60. And we say the grade equals D. And finally, anything under 59 should be an F. So we say else grade equals F. So now it's not complaining anymore, there's no error, because it realizes that if you pass in, let's say, like -5, it will just be an F. So there's always a value assigned to grade. So if it doesn't follow any of these, it's just going to be an F. And you're probably thinking, well, if I have a 95 as a score, if I pass a 95 here, aren't all these true? Like it's 95 is greater than all these values? You would be correct in that assessment, but what happens is it exits out of this if statement once it meets a condition. Once one of these is true, it exits out. For example, if it's 95, grade equals A, then it's going to say, okay, I'm done here. I'm going to move on to this print line statement. I'll move on to the next statement. It's going to skip over everything else. So once it meets its criteria, once the Boolean expression is true, it exits out of that if. So let's go ahead and try to run this. So we pass in, we call this function grade test, and we pass in, let's say, 85.0, and we should get B because it's greater than or equal to 80. And we get grade equals B, grade is B, and if you do, like, for example, 59.9, we're not going to round here. We're being really bad teachers. Usually you have to round up, but we're not rounding here. So we're saying 59.9 is going to be an F because it's less than 60. We get F. And let's say we get like 75 as a grade, we should get a C. So I hope this makes sense. This is just basically converting a score to a grade. So this is something you should know if you went to school, that like some teachers are nicer than others. For example, if I get a 59.9, usually I would get a D because they would round up. Or even like in college, there's curves, so sometimes like a 30 could be like a C. So this is not like an exact representation of how people grade tests. This is an example. This is the standard grading curve for, you know, middle school, high school, and elementary school. Once you go to college, it'll be different, but this is an example. So of how to use if, else, if statements. So next we'll be talking about switch statements, and we'll be talking about switch statements in our next lecture.